Good morning, everyone. I have read your discussion boards and provided feedback to you in the rubric that was associated with the assignment. Excuse me. The general topic of the use of the unlicensed assistive personnel, when we look at it in context of the Nurse Practice Act, is an important concept. I think it's one of the things that we forget um, to look at is our Nurse Practice Act. We really focus on, or at least I think we do, as undergraduate nurses when we're running towards the goal of NCLEX, because we talk a lot about the drivers for the national exam being what's held under our scope of practice, what's legal, what's acceptable professional practice. So we talk a lot about the Nurse Practice Act. My hope is that by going in and looking at the Nurse Practice Act specific to unlicensed assistive personnel, that you were reminded of the importance of understanding what our Nurse Practice Acts say and how they guide our practice. Importantly, our unlicensed assistive personnel. I was so interested in reading so many of your comments about the pros and cons. Several of you don't use the non-licensed professionals, whether it's a monitor tech or nursing assistants or patient care technicians. There's so many names that are out there for our unlicensed assistive personnel. I wanted you to really think about, who are these valuable members of our team? How are we honoring the training that they have? Are we using them to the top end of their practice? Are we properly mentoring and supporting them? I had several of you talk about instances when your team member was not performing in an appropriate or safe manner, either not notifying nurses of abnormal values, not following through with assignments, not being reliable. And several of you said, it was easier for me to do it and know that it was done right than it was to hand it off. I'm going to encourage you that if you're in that world of being really frustrated with what do you do when basically you're not trusting the person that's supposed to be a support to you, how do you manage that? And I'm going to encourage you to remember that communication is the key. You have got to talk to the people that you are delegating to. Explain the expectations. Give them feedback when things have been done well. Give them feedback for growth opportunities. If you're finding that handoff communication is not being done well, if you're finding as you go through the patient records in your own charting and you're finding unsafe lab values, not lab values, but vital sign records or blood sugar levels that are abnormal and they've not been communicated to you, take that very concrete objective data back to that person and say, I'm concerned that you've not shared this information with me in a timely way. Let's talk about how we can correct that. It may be that they didn't realize that the levels were not safe. It may be they got busy and they forgot. It may be that there's a personality issue and that you need to work through that. And sometimes I think those are the hardest pieces when it's not about not knowing and getting busy, but it's actually about a personality conflict or perceptions and roles that creates a rub that makes us not willing to talk with people. It is so important that we use all of the resources, and that includes our people resources, the most valuable resource we have, to the best of our ability, that we properly mentor, support, train, give feedback so that they have professional success as well. My hope is that you have a nurse manager, nurse leader that's pouring into you, that's coaching, that's mentoring, that's offering developmental opportunities because they care about you. They want you to be professionally successful. As professional nurses, we're accountable to do that for our unlicensed assistive personnel, whatever their role is, that we're pouring into them, that we're growing them, and we're making sure that they're meeting the expectations, but also the future goals of their professional practice. So I want you to be thoughtful about that and appreciate your efforts with that. Let's switch gears and talk about part two of your quality project. Before you start part two of your quality project, I'm going to encourage you to go back in and read the instructions for part two. The other thing I want you to do is go back and read the feedback that was given to you in part one in your paper. if there were gaps in your work, if there was data that was missing, if there were areas that you maybe inadvertently did not address, be sure that you've cleaned up those pieces. And that doesn't mean rewrite your paper. Just get a sticky note and put those details on there, because the first step in part 2 is to give me a brief summary of the key elements that came from part 1. And your rubric, I hope this piece of paper looks familiar to you. This is what I use to grade you. It's what I use to make sure that you've addressed all the key elements of your assignment. So if you're reading this when you start, you're going to be heading in the right direction, which is really important. So the first bullet point on this is, again, it's reminding you, tell me about part 1. A brief description and how the current problem is being measured, a financial impact, and an organization's current plan for remediation. That's an important piece. How are you currently addressing your quality issue? Because the very next step is for you to go into the literature and look for 2 to 3 innovative solutions that are not currently in practice in your facility. You're not using them. And make those suggestions and say, okay, these are the 2 to 3 innovative solutions I found that we're not currently using that would be a new idea, that would be a new approach, that maybe would be a different approach. But the important piece of this, it is based on evidence that you have gone into scholarly research, literature, articles that talk about the recommendations for best practice. Use those materials, not editorials, not commentaries, not websites. You can use government websites like the CDC, World Health Organization, or your professional website. Those are fine. But be careful with those. To substantiate your 2 to 3 new ideas, the next step is to pick one of those, just one, and do a deep dive on it. What would happen if you used that idea and put it into practice? What would that look like from a change standpoint? What would that look like from a leadership standpoint? Really think about how, if you used one of those 2 to 3 really new ideas, what would that look like from a patient quality outcomes? How would I positively impact the patient quality care? So that's the parking lot. That's where you're going to go when you have arrived. You're going to say, this is what our current process is. This is what we're currently doing. These are 2 to 3 new ideas that we're not currently doing. I'm going to take one of those and I'm going to look really hard at, if I implemented this, how would I positively impact patient outcomes? What positive change, would I affect in my current professional work environment? And that's where you're going to spend some time. Be sure that you remember that this is a leadership course and that you are talking about, as a wrap up to these steps you're going to go through, that you do a very clear job of, and the nurse leader's responsibility, the nurse leader's role, the nurse leader is accountable piece of this element, because all new ideas, they can come from lots of different directions, but you have to have leadership buy-in, you have to have leadership advocacy, you have to have leadership support in getting those things done. So I want you to really be thinking about, what's the role of the professional nurse leader in quality outcomes? So this new and shiny idea comes, ta-da, it's there. What's the nurse leader's responsibility in managing that? And then you're going to do all of that in the miracle of building a professional PowerPoint that you then put into VoiceThread, that you do your voiceover within VoiceThread. Each slide should have an audio element. You're not doing a voiceover PowerPoint and loading it into VoiceThread. That's not the way to do this. VoiceThread is building a PowerPoint, adding it to VoiceThread, and then adding your audio elements each slide as you go through. 10 to 12 minutes max. And you should practice this a few times before you record any of it. Just literally take your phone, turn on the timer, and read your script, or however your approach to it. Make sure that your PowerPoints are aesthetic. They're not cluttered with lots and lots of narrative. That you've used in-text citations on the slides where you're referencing your materials, and that your reference slide, that last slide, is in APA formatting. So if you're doing all of those things, you're making it aesthetic. You're making sure that it's that if you were standing in front of a room of your peers, they would all be engaged. They'd feel connected to your material. You're going to be successful. It is so important that you just take your time with this. Okay. As you work through this, if you have questions, concerns, if anything comes up, don't hesitate to reach out. With this being the week of Thanksgiving, I will not be as connected to my devices as I usually am, primarily just because I've got family coming in and it is Thanksgiving. Your due date for this is Sunday. Let me make sure I'm checking my notes, making sure I'm not missing anything else. Yep, so it's Sunday. And that gives me time to give you feedback and tap any loose ends before final grades are due. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. I'm not falling off the grid. I'm just know that normally I'm like standing on top of my email. I will not be doing that starting probably Wednesday evening into Thursday, just because I've got a lot of cooking to do. Wherever you are, whatever your family traditions are this time of year, please know that one of our family traditions is, before we eat, we always go around the table and we say what we're thankful for. You guys are on the list. I am thankful that I get to do this every day and get to, while I don't get to see your lovely faces, I at least feel like I'm tapping into your computer screen and saying hello. I hope that you love your careers as much as I love mine, and that you feel that what you do matters the way I feel like educating matters, and that that you are a gift to me from a student standpoint, and you let me do what I really love doing. So I am truly grateful for each and every one of you, for each of the opportunities I've had to connect with you, and to have a very minor influence over your education. I appreciate you inviting me in. Madeline and Gracie. Madeline didn't want to say goodbye or Thanksgiving or anything, so she just pieced out. Gracie, as you can see, is over my shoulder, and she has already destroyed the bed that I have made. Thus is the life of a dog mom. I hope whatever you're doing in the next couple days is refilling of your well, that you do take time out to rest and connect with people that love you. Remember, nursing school, even your RN to BSN, it is a marathon, not a sprint. So be sure that you take the time out to celebrate the really good things, and to take a moment to refill your own wells. Touch base if you need anything. Know that I'm here. Remember the Ask the Professor link, the who, what, where, when, how, logistics go there, personal stuff to your own grade and experience, send directly to me. Y'all take care. See you next week.